Ko te kaupapa o tēnei hui, ara ko te hauara o te hunga hāpuri o Aotearoa. Nō reira, anei a Kim Hamilton rawa ko Leslie Patterson, no Kōrerotia Institute for Change. Fiona Kahukura Chase, no Hau Aroa ki Taumaranui Whenua Toku Trust. Lucy Reo, no the Hepatitis Foundation of New Zealand. Me ngā kaimahi o Hui Community Aotearoa e mihi nei, e mihi nei, e mihi nei. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou koutua. Me inoi tātou. E te whānau, whaia te mātauranga kia mārama. Kia whae taki ngā mahi katoa. Tū maia, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou i a tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kei te mihi ki a koe, Katarina, mō te mihi karakia hoki. Nau mai, haere mai o tēnei wā ki a koutou. He pai ki te kite kia i a koutou mō tēnei kaupapa, Kōrerotia 2023 Sector Research Release. Ko Ronya Ivasaho, he kaihautu patuitanga au ki Hui Community Aotearoa. So really a warm welcome to all of you. It's great to see so many of you join us today. As we share our findings of Kōrerotia 2023 with you, of how Māori community and voluntary groups and organisations have adapted over the past 2 years. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already. That's great. Tuatahi, I want to thank all of you who shared
will continue today.
You've shared your experiences with us again this year and the years before. We hear you and we treat your stories and experiences you've shared with us with care and respect. So some of you might know that we started our research in 2020, only a few months after the COVID pandemic started. And we knew not-for-profits were doing more with less and the sector was struggling, but also found new and innovative ways to support their communities. And about a year and a half later, 2 years into the pandemic, we repeated our research and found the increasing demand for its services. Community groups were experiencing increasing demand, again, doing more with less. The challenges were really starting to wear down on workers and volunteers. But we also saw more collaboration and more collaborative and less competitive approaches to funding. And so this year we repeated our research and are really building on the baseline data that we have now and our collective efforts for change so that community groups can really do what they do best. So we want to share a brief video with you of some of the stories we've heard this year. And after that, we'll hear directly from our researchers, Kim and Leslie, before we move into a kōrero reflecting on our findings together. And we'll aim to finish around 12, but invite you to stay for an additional 30 minutes, if you like, for more informal kōrero among peers as well. So if I can ask Saka to share a little video of us for us, please. Can you all hear the sound?
No,
No.
not.
Can't hear the sound.
You need to tick on the share, when you go to share screen, tick that little box, like here, I think. So stop sharing and then go back and start sharing and tick the audio box.
Honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi and mana whenua voices. Our kaupapa has more of a demand than ever. We've got the mahi to do. We know exactly what we have to do to support our people to have more sovereignty over their food. At the same time, we've got 100% less funding than we did 2 years ago.
So once we registered, we actually started getting a lot less donations because a lot of people assumed we would just start to get funding, which we haven't.
Interesting.
It's a lot harder to get volunteers now with the cost of living and affording things, and so it's like a ripple effect, you know, it just affects so many people in different layers as well.
Yeah, demoralising, right?
Yeah, it is achievable.
Yes.
You just got to like keep going and keep trying.
With the tile and with our Indigenous knowledge systems gives me hope. You know, because it can be really hard working in this space, and we know what our strengths are. We're learning more of them.
Yes.
But instantly,
You've got to rest, you've got to look after yourself. I need to listen to what I'm actually saying because I'm telling them how important it is, but then I'm burning myself out. I'm the website developer, the packer, the picking up the phone.
All the things. Yeah.
I love doing it, and trying to find funding and stuff takes so much time away from the actual work that I'm trying to do.
Kia ora. Thank you, Sara. We'll share that again with you at the end. There was a bit of lagging, but it's just a showcase of some of the stories that we've heard, and a lot of you will you will be able to relate to some of what Jess and Tina have shared with us as well. So we'd like to move into our part where we invite Leslie and Kim Hamilton from Kōrerotia Institute for Change to share with us what they found doing the research on Kōrerotia 2023. So I'll hand over to Kim and Leslie.
Aroha mai. Kia ora tātou, ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa. Ko titirangi te manga, ko waio te awa, ko ngai tamatirangi Ngāti Hine Waiatarua me Ngāti Whaita ngā hapū, ko Ngāti Kahungunu ngā rauru me Ngāti Raukawa ngā iwi. Ka nui te mihi kia mō tō karakia timatanga I tēnei ata. Don't know where that noise is coming from, but I'm sure it's not me. And I'd just like to hand over to my colleague, Leslie, just to quickly introduce herself. And yeah, thank you all for being here today. Kia ora. Unmute, Leslie.
There's one in every hui. And today it's me. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Leslie Patterson taka ingoa. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'll hand over to Kim, who is going to lead the presentation of the slides. But before I do that, I'd just like to say how great it is to be here today, and great to see all of you who are attending. Kia ora, Kim.
Kia ora. Is that showing all right, or have I got the displays wrong? No, it's good. Ka pai.
Oh, so if you can change the display.
Oh,
yeah.
I always have that because I've got two. Sorry, people. Thank you. Firstly, we'd like to thank all the facilitators and the participants who have contributed to this body of knowledge, and also to Hui who asked us to do the third round of this really important work. And we're fortunate enough to have a chance to respond to some of the survey design, and to assist with a little bit of the coordination around the focus groups as well. So I will just go in. So hopefully we'll have a bit more time to talk about the findings and how you might be able to use them in the future. So we built on previous, as Rania said, we built on previous survey data from COVID and pre-COVID. Well, actually, they were both during COVID, I think, in the end. We also looked at similar reports that were happening across the sector, including the Com Voices and Volunteer New Zealand ones, which had happened in recent years as well, within the last 12 months. This year, there were less survey respondents than previous surveys, but that was kind of mitigated a little bit by extending the number of focus groups that we held, and I also think, possibly it's a reflection of how exhausted maybe the sector is as well in terms of the response. It was a fairly weighty survey, so I think there's some lessons for us, both around, or us and Hui, around timing and communicating about it, and maybe, I'm not sure how we overcome the survey kind of drop off, because what were the numbers the previous year? About 670?
606 in 2021 and 961 in the first year.
Yeah. What we will say, though, is that of those survey respondents, they definitely captured the diversity of the sector, of the networks, organisations, and a lot of the voluntary and larger paid organisations that Hui represent. Anything else to add there, Leslie?
No, Kim.
Just type any questions into chat if you like. So this slide here just shows, in a pretty ugly way, particularly the survey on the left, but the diversity of the sector. So you can see the sorts of areas that groups were working in were very, very diverse there. And also on the right-hand side, you can see that we had, quite a significant range of organisations with no paid people, a small number of paid people, and a few with quite a few employees there as well. So yeah, there we go. This is a quote that we think really kind of introduced a summary of what it's like out there for a lot of service providers. And so, yeah, do you want to say anything else around this? Oh, the comment that we had, sorry, Leslie, yeah, go.
Well, just to say, as Ronya pointed out in the introduction, we were interested in talking with people or exploring people's experience over the last 2 years. So the fieldwork for the immediate prior report concluded just as Aotearoa was going into the second lockdown. It's kind of hard, I feel anyway, with the pandemic, it's really hard to kind of anchor time. So the previous report was conducted under those circumstances. And as most of you now, will know now, that New Zealand is just exiting the last of the public health measures around the COVID pandemic. So when we were asking people, what's it been like, or asking people to reflect, or in the survey itself to reflect over the last 2 years, that's the time frame. And so the report captured a lot of really significant events in communities, in addition to the last few years of navigating the COVID pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we do know about disasters, and it speaks to this quote as well, is that, the pandemic was a disaster in lots of regards for a lot of people out there in communities, and disasters tend to expose new, exacerbate existing, and create new vulnerabilities. So I think, and make existing vulnerabilities worse. And I think this quote definitely captures that. So this is another little summary. So we really had to keep our heads in thinking about what is the well-being of the sector, how are we going to bring that story to life? And I think we, everybody, I don't think there's anybody in this Zoom at the moment who wouldn't agree that, coming out of COVID, the climate events, or the flooding, all the horrific climate events that have happened, the cost of living is putting the screws on communities, and we're all part of those communities as well. There's lots of regions where housing is problematic. There's a housing crisis. There's poor access to rentable housing. Rents have gone up through the roof. Buying a house has gone beyond many people's abilities, and there's ongoing inequalities. And the other thing too is, obviously, we're heading into election 2023, where there's a lot of promises that are going to be made, and it'll be great for the sector to consider how they're going to keep people who are looking for the vote honouring their promises. Yeah, we already talked a little bit about the diversity. So I think one of the things that did come up is that most people who were interviewed and responded to the survey are total kaupapaholics. Well, that's our word. They're very passionate about the things that they do, the way they serve their communities, and they'll do it on the smell of an oily rag or no oily rag sometimes. People are putting their passion into the work in service to their communities. And yeah, so what we were interested in really looking at, though, was what was going to help in terms of hauora and well-being, and what are the common struggles, what are the common challenges, and what are some of the ways in which the sector is responding to those. So that's that. Anything to add to that one, Leslie? No? Ka pai. I'm not checking chat, so if there's anything in chat, just shout it out. So what we came up with was really 4 cross-cutting themes, and adaptability is largely a combination of those factors. And again, what we noticed was the huge commitment to kaupapa, that there's very adaptive and flexible organisations responding to their community needs and wants, that there's been increased capability to think strategically and plan to meet those challenges. And I wonder if some of that maybe was during the lockdown, where people got a chance to take a breath and really think about what is the future going to hold, what spaces do they want to work in, what work do they actually really want to do. So COVID, while it was pretty disastrous for a lot of communities and people, it created some conditions for change, and there were high trust models often implemented in some of the funding arrangements that happened over that time. And I think one of the reflections that's came through in the research was that, people are wanting to know, providers and organisations are wanting to know, how can we maintain that high trust contracting model, multi-year contracts, a lot more discretionary resourcing and support for communities. A lot of organisations adapted to using new tools and technology. I think the growth of webinar and Zooms pretty much shot through the roof. So I think we were using those things also to meet and connect both with whānau or clients or one another during that time. And people were thinking about how we can deliver our services differently. Can we do what we do in a hybrid model? Can we do it online? Whose needs are we really not meeting at the moment, and who needs support? So there was a lot more of a bespoke approach to that. Anything to add there, Les? No? Just jump in if there is.
You're doing very welcome. I just need to say that my husband's just arrived home, so I'm just giving him instructions to
make a coffee or be quiet. Ka pai. I guess, a good measure of the health and wellbeing of the sector is really to look at the workforce, the people who are in those organisations. And so I'm assuming you can all read. I don't want to bang on about it too much, and obviously copies of the slide and the report are going to be made available. So if there's any questions that you have around any of these other things or any of the points that are written up in here, just chuck them in the chat, have a chat about them later. I don't think, is there anything surprising there? I think it really harks back to what Ronya was saying before around the over-delivery of services by the sector, often beyond, their resourcing both in people and in money. Yeah. Anything else?
I think also, Kim, just, to add on to that over-resourcing is thinking about that current context. And one of the things that, was quite a strong theme in focus groups anyway, was trying to retain staff in the context of a cost of living crisis. And also when in other sectors there were quite significant pay settlements, etc. And just the challenges in the sector to respond to those additional external drivers, I guess. People were very, very, very aware of the commitment of if they were working with a paid workforce, of the commitment of their workforce and of the skills of their workforce, and were very, very concerned about, how to retain that workforce in order to continue to respond to the increasing demand that they were experiencing.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the other things that came through too is that people, a lot of the larger organisations were looking for people to come back to work, and that wasn't necessarily a way of working that suited everybody anymore. So I think there's challenges in there around maybe looking for a bit more flexibility around being in the office, doing some work from home, and being in the community, and thinking about what those things might look like. There was definitely a lot of interest in te tiriti and cultural competency training and support for the sector. Yeah, and I think definitely across the focus groups, and in fact, meeting this morning, Lucy and Fiona, who are online, it's clear there are community champions that are leading a lot of different kaupapa across their communities, and so ngā mihi nui kia koutou. So yeah, this is probably just reflecting one facet of a very busy person's life. Obviously, the well-being of the sector and the well-being of people is connected to funding. I mean, if you can't pay your bills, can't pay your rent, can't pay your mortgage, it's hard to be healthy and well. I think ultimately there was a lot of discussion that echoed previous research around the adequacy of resourcing, how accessible it was, how time-consuming it might be to apply, how transparent are the decisions that are being made about funding in communities. And then, you know, as I said before, you know, technology, high trust funding relationships were there. Communities established different infrastructure and supports around to help themselves, their workforce and their communities, and there was a lot of capability development that happened over that time. Anything there? Want to add anything, Leslie? No? We'll keep going through, give you more time to chat. Yeah, I guess that was a word from obviously a boss.
I think we selected this quote. I mean, it is in the report, and actually the person who gave voice to this may even be in this meeting. But I think what it does is it draws together those 4 cross-cutting themes that we see as really underpinning the experience of the sector. So, you know, you've got this incredibly adaptive and adaptable sector with a workforce that is really strongly kaupapa driven. There's a lot of funding challenges, but they're not singular. They vary quite a lot depending on the context of the organisation or group. And as you saw earlier, because of the diversity of the respondents, you know, some of you people are leading really quite large corporate entities in a way, and some of you are leading smaller ventures that have got a different type of focus, and then the connection. And so this quote really does sort of capture that because people are so passionate in the sector, you know, it's how they can be looked after in a time of great change and increasing need. But that might look different depending on where you're sitting in the sort of organisational group that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. All right. You want to talk to this one, Leslie? You go.
Well, I guess another really important theme that came up across the focus groups, but also in some of the text responses in the survey itself, was the way that many people are wanting to maintain the connections that have been developed, particularly during COVID. I think what COVID did with moving online was to give opportunities for people to connect relatively easily. Even though many people miss the face-to-face connections, actually new connections arose through COVID. And so that's, people want to really build on that, really want to build on sharing information, sharing skills, partnering, finding new opportunities, making sure that there's not duplication, learning from each other about what's working and what's not working well. And then sort of moving forward, there was quite a lot of discussion, and again there was a lot of variation in the discussion about reconnecting in a post-COVID context, because there's still lots of people who really like to meet, for example, online, as we have done today, but people are also wanting to reconnect in person. It's quite challenging for different organisations and different groups to know what to do. And of course, many are going for a hybrid sort of approach. But I think that connection, is a key. Building those connections, it's a really big opportunity for the sector. And I think it's also another strength that the sector brings. It is something that underpins the sector's adaptiveness, the adaptability, the relationships that are there, and the connections that are being strengthened all the time.
So the only other thing is that, like, I guess the last slide there is both, I think that really speaks to some of the possibilities around better communicating to clients and funders and community and workforce to build on the reputation of communities and the organisations that serve them. A lot of people talked about the importance of social media and digital storytelling and creating awareness, not just brand awareness, but I guess awareness that you guys are in communities and you're there to provide whatever it is you do. And I think too, we were thinking about around some of the succession, there's lots of opportunities for engaging with rangatahi who might want to help out with the website, who might want to manage your Insta, who might want to do a bit of digital storytelling. And I think, looking at younger people could possibly help offset a lot of the issues that are going on for volunteering. And I think the other thing too to be aware of is that what we saw was that people didn't necessarily want to commit long-term to organisations in a voluntary capacity. They were keen to participate in particular projects and initiatives. So things that might be discreet, get them interested, allow them to show their skills. So I think there's something for us all to consider, really. Okay. I guess that in a way, this feels like a bit of a summary slide for us, both just acknowledging the huge amount of innovation and the success that people, work their butts off to achieve over the time. People talked a lot about new opportunities, and I think we just kind of echo chambering a little bit our previous messages. But the other thing too that was really worrying was how burnout was coming through in the survey responses and in the focus groups. People are exhausted, and they want to do the very best that they can. They want to serve their communities. They want their organisation to be amazing, and they're working under a lot of pressure. And I guess it's kind of a scale in a way, the optimism and with the real threat of burnout. And I guess one of the worries for us is if in regions there's some sector breakdown, burnout, or at a national sector, that would be a very frightening prospect, really. Do you want to say anything to that, Leslie?
No, I think you've captured it. Kim, there's just a couple of comments in the chat. I wonder if we could respond to some of those, and if any more come in. So Kath Wallace has commented that many people or some people in the sector are not involved in social service delivery, and in terms of environmental issues, there's been a pivot away from funding environmental concerns, and I think that would have, we can see that in the I think in some of the feedback that we've had through this work, Kath, there's been a pivot away from funding many things, and I think that's something that the data set itself it could be explored in more detail to see where those ebbs and flows are occurring, and using that for advocacy purposes might be a next step there. Don't know if you've got any comment, Kim.
No, I mean, I think no, I don't have any comment to make in particular on that. I think whatever the groups are, they're contributing to an overall goal of social cohesion. Whether they're networks that are getting their funding from, organisations overseas or whoever they are, I think a lot of the same issues that affect people are going to affect the networks and organisations, regardless of whether or not they're delivering on social services. I think there's definitely a high focus on environmental concerns. I don't know what the quantity of respondents was in this particular piece of work, but I also know that there are new funding opportunities opening up around communities doing that, or working with councils and things like that as well, who are getting quite substantial amounts of money to address some of those things. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question. Sorry. Yeah, and we just really wanted to close out with the words from a couple of the focus group participants here. And I guess we've got a not so good story at the top, and a kind of a sense of that optimism in the second quote there as well. I think actually one of the things we haven't talked about in detail is that there's definitely a mental health concern across the sector in terms of anxiety. A lot of people are feeling anxious at the moment. And, thinking about how do you support the mental health of people who are working in the sector if they can't afford to subscribe to organisations like EAP or things like that. Is there something else that needs to be done on a national scale to support people in communities? And we know that the sector's already in crisis, the mental health sector, but is there something more that could be done? And that is really, I think that's us. So, yeah. Oh, stop share.
Kia ora. Thanks, Kim and Leslie. Kōrerotia, Stuart Allen, Toku ingoa. I'm the kai whakahaere mātua, the CE of Huie. So thanks so much. It's only obviously a snapshot, so much more depth in the report itself. And we'll be posting up where you can access that on the Huie website. Just before we go, I'm going to start talking now with Fiona and Lucy to talk a little bit about their feedback on how it's been for them over the last couple of years and their reactions to the research. Also wanted to acknowledge in the 2020 research, we partnered with our research partners with CSI, the Centre for Social Impact, PNZ, Philanthropy New Zealand and Volunteering New Zealand, and then the 2021 research was Volunteering New Zealand and Huie together. So this research 2 years on is specific. Huie just running this research ourselves. So it's been awesome to have Kim and Leslie work with us over these last few months. Also noted, Dawn, your question in there around the survey. Yes, people are tired. That's very evident in the survey results. And we have done a lot of thinking as we were running the survey, and we were getting a lot of feedback on how people were feeling very over-surveyed, very tired about doing this research in another 2 years in a different way, in a way that is more alongside how we ran some of the focus groups, which was both online and in person. We actually got people just to kōrero together, and that really made a big difference in terms of the richness of the feedback that we got. So thinking about that going forward in the next couple of years when we repeat this research about how we might do that. Also picking up, Vanessa, your question in the chat too, that we will work to release the data set. The data set will be opened up so you can do your own analysis in there and break it down into something that's meaningful as well. If you want to do more research, there's so many other layers that you could take this research and start to do the analysis from there. So now I'm going to bring in Fiona Kahukura Chase and Lucy Rio. So they are going to just introduce themselves quickly, and then we're going to talk a little bit about their reactions to the research. So Zaka, if you can just connect them, great. So Fiona, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself?
Tēnei takumihi ki a koutou katoa, ko Fiona Kahukura Chase tōku ingoa, no taumara nui ahau, te taku tōku Mama, e te tahu toku papa no mokai pātia, tai hapi hoki, mihi nui ki a koutou. So I'm Fiona from Taumaranui. I live in Taumaranui on my dad's side, my mum's side. On my dad's side, I'm from a little place called Taihape. Both the centre of the universes. My mahi is really around engaging with our entire community of Taumaranui, which has been very challenging. So, but mahi nui ki a koutou.
Kia ora, thanks Fiona. And Lucy, sends her apologies because we have audio with her, but we were having connection problems today. So we don't have her on video, but we've got her audio. So over to you, Lucy, to introduce yourself.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Lucy Rioahau, he Rioahau no Ngārauru, I Taranaki, I te tau tōku mama, he uria no hoki no Aitutaki, tētahi mau te reo o ngā kuki airani o I te tau tōku papa. Ko au te Māori Engagement Coordinator for the Hepatitis Foundation o Aotearoa, and my mahi involves travelling the motu, actually. The Hepatitis Foundation covers all of Aotearoa. So I travel the motu meeting different Māori health providers, kaupapa Māori organisations, DHBs, hauora and the like, just to have a kōrero about what hepatitis B is and what we do at the foundation, reaching out to our people with hepatitis B.
Kia ora. Thanks, Lucy. So Fiona, your thoughts on the research? Does it resonate with you? It's huge, right? But does some of those things, what resonated with you with some of the mahi that you've been doing at the community level over the last couple of years?
Oh, look, it's a really trying time, especially in small communities, rural, isolated communities like Taumaranui. The data probably doesn't fully resonate with Taumaranui. You could probably times it by 10. And the impact of what's happened post-COVID to our communities has really set us further back than we ever would have come before. So it resonates, but it's probably not profound enough. It's probably even worse for places like Taumaranui, where in our little suburb of Matapuna, we're close to 80% Māori. Māori have a average income in the Ruapehu district of less than $23,000 annually. So, yeah, it's a very, very, very trying time.
Kia ora. How about you, Lucy, in your work with the Hepatitis Foundation? Is this kind of what you're seeing across the community groups that you're connecting with across the motu?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, what I've been seeing is health is not a priority for most Māori families. Māori are struggling to find housing. Māori are struggling to find jobs, and that could be the same across the motu, but in particular, I'm finding, working specifically with Māori in Pacific Island, that the struggle's real. The struggle is real, and we need to break those barriers down to get out into the communities, because they're not going to go to the doctors. That's not a priority. So yeah, there's a lot of mahi that we need to do. And I must say that it's been my privilege to be out in those communities, meeting the likes of the hauora, the outreach staff that are passionate about helping others. So yeah, massive job.
You. So Fiona, how has this been in terms of your local community leaders, your community champions? How have they managed this kind of huge need that's been happening over the last couple of years?
Oh, I think there's been a real struggle because of the lack of funding, in every sector. So there's this real power struggle. And there's a continued siloed approach where that's just proven not to work for our people. So I think there needs to be a more genuine engagement with people on the ground. And what we did embark on, and I was fortunate enough to be part of, was the Rangatiratanga project which was truly remarkable for small, and had a real profound and positive outcomes for our participants through June and July, I think that was. And it was a wave that we were able to tailor and put in a culturally sensitive program to be able to empower whānau to change their own destinies. And the speed at which those could be achieved highlights the effectiveness of the project's approach in addressing the unique needs and aspirations of the participants. So it was real ground level, and that's what I think where we need to focus on is how to get and directly influence whānau that will be able to how can I put it, have quick outcomes, good outcomes for themselves. That was through a combination of education, mentorship and support through the project, so that participants were able to break down barriers that had previously hindered their progress. I'll just give you a quick example. So one wahine I worked with, about 50 years old, she when I did her pathway plan with her, she said, well, I have to, and she wanted sustainable living, and te reo was her two main goals. And she said, well, I need to find a job. And so the few days later, she came back to me and said, I've got a job. I said, oh, that was quick. That's awesome. And she said, well, she volunteered with iwi to be a water monitor. And she said, I can't volunteer anymore. I have to go and find a job. So they offered her a job. So that's instantly put her on it. But she would never have done that. She would have kept on volunteering because she was doing those good things that need to be done for our awa. But she turned that into a job, and now she's on a really healthy pathway for her and her whānau. Yeah, so.
Great story. How about you, Lucy? Some of the community champions and community leaders that you've seen around the motu as you've been travelling around? Does the research reflect some of the challenges that they're talking about? There's information in there around burnout, tiredness, but at the same time, there's positive stories in there about collaboration and working together.
Yeah, so I think the burnout for me is coming from my end rather than, well, I suppose it could be fair to say that we're all burnt out because we're all overworked. The issue with the foundation, and I hear the word silo from Fiona, is it feels like the foundation is working in its own silo because we're specific to hepatitis B. But the beauty about going to the likes of Hauora is that they offer a whole package of services. So my mahi is to fit in where the mahi that they're already doing, so that we're actually adding value to the mahi that others are doing by implementing education programs, the point of care testing, so that when they're out in their own communities, and who better to get into the communities but your own, when they're out in their communities, they can add on this extra service to the whānau rather than them going into the home and then we going into the home, or we're chasing them for blood tests. So it's about the whole package and the whole well-being of the person. The champions are amazing. And it's amazing talking to kaumātua, because the word from a kaumātua usually gets across more from the whānau rather than someone else coming in and educating. So it's been a blessing to be on this hikoi, collaborating with other passionate, marvelous people. So everyone's overworked and underpaid. Having said that, we probably wouldn't stop, and we're not going to stop. We're going to just keep on keeping on.
I think that very much speaks to the research about that idea of being kaupapa driven, like having a passion and a commitment to the people, to the mahi to the communities that people in this sector are working with, the community groups are working with, and whether there's money or not, that the push is to keep going, because you feel that heart to heart connection with the people that you're working alongside. So I'm interested about your thinking. Maybe we'll go to you, Fiona, about how you think that the sector and the community groups across the motu could use this research, and how Huie could tau toku some of this mahi that's going on. Any
Okay.
idea?
Yep. So I think when you've got projects or you've got business cases or whatever you need to do, it needs to be holistic, and it needs to be culturally relevant, an approach, and a model that empowers individuals or those people that you're seeking to help, and those communities to achieve self-determination and build a brighter future for themselves. That's just like the rangatiratanga project, and the pathway, and that they receive the resourcing, and the support, and that's why I think it was so successful, and we achieved really positive outcomes, and we're able to transform people's lives really quickly. I'll give you an example. One of the first ones, another example, I went to a 19-year-old wahine who lived in Kōrerotia, but she's Ngāti Kahungunu, and so she lives without her whānau support. So I went to her, did a pathway plan with her straight away, and she achieved those. So within 2 months, she had received 2 offers to be a kaiako next year, 2 years training paid, and then the 3rd year she will receive her master's, and that's her pathway now. Before that, she didn't know what she was going to do. So it's real quick, and I mean, I spent 4 hours with her, and then ongoing weekly contact over the internet. So it really has to, I think, to make really good changes, it has to really be able to deep individual approach, but real holistic and culturally appropriate, and resourced.
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful kōrero, because it's about, you cannot just pull out one person from a community and provide one service for that one person. It's whānau, it's community based. There's so many touch points for how people might engage and intersect across all of our sector, right? So it could be arts, sports, environment, and so on. Like social services, the largest money, but it's not necessarily the largest number of or the largest organizations that work in across the sector. So I'm interested to hear if anyone has any other questions. Let's go to your one, Dawn. So you're saying, what will this research now be used for? Is it advocacy for increasing capacity for the organizations who took part? What I can talk to you about is from Huie's side. So in the research that we did with VNZ in 2021, we took that research and we helped design some of the mahi that and support that we've provided directly to community groups. We wrote a series of white papers for government and for funders that pulled out the core thinking. We put up a community dashboard which people could take the research findings and do their own analysis on that, and we will have that as well. That's updated already with this research, so you can do your own analysis in areas, for example, that might be useful for you, so subsectors or regions or groups of people. We released the open data set that people could also take that research and do it themselves if they wanted to break it down. We ran a hackathon last year, and out of that took some things. For example, like we did some analysis of the small community groups, some visualization of the results, and we shared that widely, particularly with funders and into government, so that they could see some of these really grassroots challenges that people are experiencing, the community groups are experiencing on the ground. We also use it as an advocacy tool. So we do talk, funding systems change is one of our strategic priorities at Huie. So we do have more mahi plan to meet with funders, speak with government funders as well, to talk about some of these challenges. We also went ahead and did some work around hauora. So for example, we've got the Tato podcast, which is interviews with community champions for them to talk about their own hauora challenges and what they've done to help manage that over the years. So any other questions? I can see Dawn's question. Any other questions that anyone has? So either for Fiona, Lucy, or Kim, or Leslie. Lucy, I'm interested to hear from you about whether this research is something that you could use going forward to help demonstrate and talk about some of the challenges within your organisation.
One of the big challenges, like we've all heard already, is about the funding. So we've been funded by the Ministry of Education for the last 30 years since our existence, but the last 10 years we haven't had an increase in funding whatsoever. The last 7 years has been a one-year rollover until last year, when it turned over to Te Whatuora, and I guess we got a 2-year rollover to give them a chance to get themselves established. But there's just we don't have a backstop. If that contract weren't to roll over the following year, we don't have a backstop. So there's always that uncertainty. It's gone to the point where we've had to reevaluate our own service delivery model, and so we've had to contract outside contractors to have a look at it, review the service delivery model, and see where we actually can cut costs, if at all. So yeah, the biggest issue is around funding and capacity with staff. We've only got 18 full-time staff covering the motu, trying to find these 50,000 extra people that have Hep B. So it's about working smarter, absolutely about working smarter and collaborating with others that are passionate like us about getting that mahi done.
Got it. Thanks, Lucy. I think that power of collaboration is huge, and that really comes through in the research about how much has happened in the last couple of years where people have really reached out and built new relationships. So there's just a question for Kim and Leslie here about, did any of the respondents identify a need for support on environmental sustainability planning? So she's put examples, immunisation, carbon reporting, etc.
I'm pretty sure there was some discussion around climate policies, organizational climate policies, but that might have been the extent. But I do think that I mean, we all need to be thinking about this, both in terms of business continuity, but in terms of also lightening our footprint on Papatua Nuku. So maybe because we were looking more at people's health, maybe the tinana side of things, or the hinengaro, thinking about the whenua would be a good focus for future research. Anything to add there, Leslie? You're muted.
Sorry, I was just going to quickly dive in and actually have a look to see if anything was raised in addition to what you've already said, Kim. I think the focus really was more on health and well-being impacts for the sector, but saying that there definitely was some material there around environmental matters. But I'd have to go back and have a look in the data. Sorry, I can't recall anything in addition to that.
Kia ora, thank you. So thanks so much to you, Lucy and Fiona, for joining us today. Really helpful to hear your kōrero that goes directly to what's happening on the ground. That's really important for everyone to hear, and the reality, the lived experience of running community groups and participating in community groups, about how this research comes from a high level national point of view down into that grassroots level. So certainly at Huie we will continue to take this mahi. We need you though. We need you to actually help us get it out and spread and wider. We will take it to the channels and the key stakeholders that we have, particularly into government and into philanthropic funders. But we ask you to help us share this so that other people can see themselves in this research itself. We know from last time just that ability to feel really affirmed and feel heard and feel that they're not feeling alone, not feeling so isolated is really powerful. And there's also some really awesome stories and awesome kōrero in here that we will be sharing more of. There's some awesome quotes and there's so much depth and richness in there. So we're looking forward to sharing that with the coming months. And I'm going to hand over to Ronya now and she's going to tell you what's next. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa. He mihi nunui ki a koutou. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for your kōrero, for your whakaaro today, and for being here with us, and all the contributions that you've had so far into this research. So we talked a little bit about what's next, and so one of the mahi that we've been doing over the last couple of years now is develop a community holder dashboard. And so it looks into the findings, it visualizes the findings across 2020, 2021 and 2023. So we've just had it updated for the 2023 data, and it really is just another opportunity for you to go into the data and look at it more closely, and you'll be able to look at it to drill down into some of the regions, into some of the key challenges, and some of the impacts that we see across the sector as well. But there's and you'll see this this little slide here that just gives you a quick glance of what this dashboard can provide to you. There's more work that we will be doing at Huie, but also we're really keen to hear from you about the areas of the research that you're particularly interested in and that we could dive deeper into, because there's more work that we'll be doing with data scientists and other volunteers and partners to really look into some of the data. We're keen to look into the community, the support needs of CEs as well. There's a large number of leaders who participated in the survey, so we can look into that. And yeah, we'll be doing some more analysis and be publishing some more information over the next few weeks as well. But also we'll invite you to come to another 4 sessions that we're running in September, where we deep dive into those 4 themes, those 4 cross-cutting themes that we heard about today. So adaptability, the workforce, funding and connection. So I'll share those with you in an email afterwards, and you can sign up to those. If any of you are interested in being part of a kōrero like Fiona and Lucy today for any of those 4 sessions, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, come and join us for a bit of a deep dive into those four areas. I think apart from that, we are going to finish, but there's an opportunity. If you want to stay on for up to another half an hour, please feel free and welcome to. We'd love to talk to you more about the findings. We're going to stop recording in a moment, and yeah, stay on if you like, and we'll share the slides and the report with you as well. And Saka is going to pop something in the, he has already popped something in the link in the chat. If you can click on that and tell us a bit more about your feedback from today, that would be awesome. So I just wanted to thank again Kim and Leslie for your awesome mahi and for being here today with us, to Fiona and Lucy, for Katarina doing our mihi, and Saka for supporting us behind the scenes, and Rochelle, and thank you everybody. So I'm going to hand over to Saka, who's going to close us with a karakia, and then please feel free to stay on for a little bit longer. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and I put which link is not working, Malu? Just so is it the survey one or the dashboard?
Most recent ones, I think it's the survey one.
Okay, we'll get that fixed right now.
It's okay, I can do that.
Okay, so wait. Thank you, Rania, everyone. We'll just close off with the karakia, but as Rania said, there will be just an informal chat afterwards, so please stay if you can. Me ino tatou. Ka whakairia te tapu kia wātia ai te ara, kia turu ki whakataha ai, kia turu ki whakataha ai, hui e taike.